Today would have been Oliver Reginald Tambo's 100th birthday. Often remembered for being the longest-serving president of the ruling African National Congress, leading it from 1967 to 1991. He had a reputation for being worldly, wise and democratic and stern. But how was he as a father? Well, CNBC Africa's Karabo Letlhatlha sat down with Oliver Tambo's son, Dali Tambo, to find out more.
What's your earliest memory of your father? What kind of a man was he?
My earliest memory of him was sitting in the bath with him, looking at his willy and looking at mine and thinking, my goodness, they're the same but yours is bigger. And he was bathing me and I said, what is that? And he said, it's a wasp. So I went and I picked it up and it stung me. And I remember him comforting me and taking out the sting. And later that day, I asked him, I was in the kitchen, and I was taking out some ice out of the fridge. I asked him, what is that? And he said, it's a bee. So I picked it up. It stung me. You know? And I remember that very vividly, but there were many memories of him when we were young. But his time with us was intermittent. So he would be there and then he'd be gone for a long time and then he'd be back, you know. So I would see him when I was young maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Yet I do have memories.
Isn't it easy for kids to understand when they are little like this?
Yes.
That their father is a very important man in the narrative of a country, especially when you are in exile.
Yeah.
When did you understand that you live in exile?
Quite early, because there were so many South Africans in the community. I didn't know what their political role was. I just knew Uncle Yusuf, Uncle Joe Slovo, etc., etc.
You had hundreds of uncles.
Yes, I had so many brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts and things. So our house was always full. First our flat and then the house was always full. And so you would hear these stories. And then of course from my mother, because she had had to leave her family behind, her relatives and community. And she would always tell us, your father told me I would be out of the country for 5 years. And of course we all know it ended up being 30. No, so I was quite conscious of that. But we went to boarding schools quite early because she was working heavily and he wasn't around. So they had faith in convents, in nuns, Catholic especially. And they sent us to these convents quite early, you know. And I remember her having a conversation in front of me with the head nun, the Mother Teresa, to say, we'll just tell people, Mrs. Tambo, that his father's a lawyer, you know. But the Catholic nuns were very supportive of the struggle. So I'd often hear them talking amongst themselves or saying to me things like, you know, good luck to your father, Dali, and all of this kind of stuff. They were quite radical. So they were conscious of the struggle, and yet to other parents, they would pretty much say, his father's a lawyer.
To make you fit in.
Yeah, I guess so.
I just had a chat with Dr. Freddy Jinwala, who's the chairperson of your late parents' foundation.
Yes.
She says that your father had deep roots in religion, that he was interested in theology. Was he openly religious around the house? Is it something he encouraged you guys to use as a point of reference?
Not really. I think he was quite conscious of the fact that he was popping in. You know? So when he would pop in, he wouldn't be that restrictive, you know. But what I would notice is him and my mother would go into the lounge or sometimes at night into the bedroom. You'd hear them singing African church hymns for 2 hours, praying kneeling by the bed, praying for like hours, literally. So they were both very devout Christians. And yet with my mother, she would often on Sundays say, "You go and represent me at church." She was too tired.
I've done my fair share.
Exactly. But no, I mean, he was very religious. He loved everything about religion, but he was a liberation theologist. He believed in, you know, a God that was there for the poor and a liberatory God. So he wasn't what I would normally come across in a London church. His was liberation theology.
Okay. Now, you left the country soon after you were born.
Yes.
Going, and I'm sure you know, this must not be top of mind when it comes to memory. There's very little I expect you to remember. But in your stay, due to your father's banning and his organization's banning when you were in England, did you miss this country that you never quite got to know?
It wasn't so much missing it. It was constant curiosity and the constant knowledge that one day we would come home. So I would see friends of mine in other African countries, their countries and their movements gaining independence and their movements going in to rule those countries. And I would literally every 5 years be saying bye-bye to another bunch of friends because they were, and I remember feeling, when will be our turn? When Zimbabwe became independent, we all felt, and we could now go to Zimbabwe and be close to the borders of South Africa. We all felt that, you know, it's coming. Same with Namibia. But it still wasn't us yet, you know. So I always had this burning desire. My friends would say to me, "Why won't you vote? You should be voting for the Labour Party because they're more likely to implement sanctions." I'd say to them, "I'm not voting for your leaders. My leaders are at home in South Africa. They're on Robben Island. I'll vote when they come out." So I was always conscious of the fact that the big return would one day happen. We just didn't know when.
What do you do in that decade when Zimbabwe gets independence and we still did not have ours? You know, I mean, it was inevitable towards the 90s.
Yes.
But what do you do when you, I mean, you, I expect, should have run out of patience. That what is this place that I should go to? Why can't I go there? As a growing boy, I imagine that you had
Absolutely.
natural curiosity.
I mean, look, there was a time when I desperately wanted to join MK. And my father had said to me, "Look, you know, you don't speak the language, you don't know the country, you're going to go in there, get yourself killed and get other people killed. So find another way to contribute." I was quite upset about it. Then after seeing Joe Slovo, he sent Joe Slovo to explain it to me in a gentler way. And then I joined the British Army. I applied to join the British Army. And they said, wrote to me and said, "You must go for this officer course at a place called Sandhurst." My mother saw this document, told my father, and he lost it a bit with me. "What right do you have to join other people's armies? If you want to fight, you must join MK." And this and I said, "But I try." So,
Same guy who said, "You can't."
So, you know, we were angry. We were angry young men. We did want to do damage to our oppressors, but we were under the discipline of the movement. And so you contributed from where you were and how you could, you know.
There's a give and take relationship when you share your father with a country, with a movement. And maybe it explains the intermittentness at which you speak about him seeing you guys grow up. Did you ever feel jealous of the movement, or what consumes his time?
Not really. You know, what I would do is when I'd come home for the holidays, he had an office at the top of the house. And it was full of his letters and speeches and Sichabas, the Struggle magazine, African Communist, all of these journals. I would go up there, I'd feel like a spy because I would read every letter, I'd read every journal. And sometimes he would come home and I'd ask him about things. He'd say, "How did you know that?" And I told him, "Dad, I go up there and I read your stuff and I read your letters and all of this kind of thing." And I could see he was pleased that I had this knowledge. But afterwards, I found he would leave deliberately books and things on his desk for me to read. Karl Marx, this, that, and the other, you know, all kinds of things like this. So as I grew up, I was never interested in fiction. I only ever was excited by history and by factual political writings.
Stranger than fiction, much stranger.
Yes, yeah. Same with, in comparison to my friends, they love pop stars and things like this. All my heroes were politicians or revolutionaries.
Same here.
You know? So it was not so much that I resented it, but I had to get to know him my own way. And I would also see how people treated him. And, you know, I would always be surprised at the warmth with which he was treated. The love he was given by people. This was when I was younger. And, you know, as you get older, you understand better why that is and what he means to these people.
What is it like growing up as the son of Oliver Tambo?
Look, there were times when I almost forgot my name, Dali, because no one would introduce me as Dali. This is OR's son. This is the chief's boy. This is the president's son, etc., etc. And I then wanted a bit of independence, to tell you the truth, you know.
Break away from the shadow.
Yeah. I mean, I studied political science and international affairs in Paris, but I ended up going into the arts in a political way, you know, Artists Against Apartheid and things like this that we founded. No, I've never, it's always been the opposite, to tell you the truth. I didn't go into politics because I didn't want to be his Achilles heel. He was a special man and upright, pure in terms of integrity and honesty and things like this. And those were the only times he'd get really annoyed with me, is if I was dishonest, if I did something that was, to him, you know, unethical, etc. No, I mean, he never shouted at us. I think once he shouted at my sister and me, raised his voice. We went out to a party, they said be back, him and my mother, be back by 12. We came back at 3, they'd locked all the doors. We were banging on the doors. Eventually I climbed through a window, a small window, and got in. But he called us to the room and told us off. Tembi started arguing with him. And I kept nudging her to say, let's go.
Slow down, slow down.
Exactly. Till he shouted at us, he said, "I'm not just your father, I'm your commander."
Oh, that must have reverberated around the room.
And that was enough, we left.
Powerful conversation taking place there with the son of OR Tambo, Dali Tambo.